It is very generous of you, Dr. Anderson, and I'm so humbled to be here with you today. I count this as one of the greatest privileges to speak today, to serve those who are going forth to serve others. And so I just want to say thank you to Dr. Anderson for Appalachian Bible College hosting me today. I want to say thank you to my boss back up in Martinsburg, my bosses, Colonel Timko and Colonel Annie, for allowing me the time to come down here today. And I want to bring you greetings from Evangel Baptist Church, where I pastored for 20-some years in Hagerstown, Maryland. So I still attend there, not on staff right now, but just want to bring you greetings in Christ's name from them. If you have your Bibles today, Matthew chapter 8. And then just to expedite things, I always give people another reference that I'm going to be using, Luke chapter 23. So a lot of this is on your handouts, but Matthew chapter 8 and Luke chapter 23. You're preparing for ministry at Appalachian Bible College, and you will be amazed how short the time that you have left here is, and most of you will go serve in a local church in some capacity or another, whether that be a Sunday school teacher, a deacon, a trustee, a pastor, a youth pastor. You're going to leave here, and because you attended Appalachian Bible College, people are going to know that you have a degree. They're going to expect you to be trained, and they're going to look to you for guidance. And I think it's perfectly fitting that they should. You know, God has entrusted you with a great gift that you may not appreciate for many years, to set this time apart in your life and study God's Word. And so while you're studying here, I hope you're developing your theologies of what you believe about church and what you believe about salvation and what you believe about heaven, that you are building that into your lives. And so I'd just like to give you a little brick to put into that wall that you're building of theology of military service. If you're going to be a pastor, one man has said this: you will find that Sundays come around with an alarming degree of regularity. Right? Some of you will get that years later. And just like this week, this coming week is, this week on the 11th is Veterans Day, you're going to find that other days pop up on the calendar, like Independence Day, July 4th. Memorial Day that's at the end of May. And you are going to be faced with a decision. As you influence the church, are you going to put a patriotic hymn in the bulletin that week, or are you just going to let it pass by? If you have veterans that are in your congregation, are you going to have them stand up and recognize the branch of service and the time that they served? Are you going to have a moment of silence on Memorial Day to honor those who did what Jesus called, show no greater love than that they would lay down their lives? Are you going to acknowledge, as you are working with somebody, that they're a veteran or they're in the military? Some of you may pastor churches or be in churches that are near military bases, and the members that are attending your congregation are there, and what is different about how you care for their family than for the other families that aren't in the military? Are you aware of the culture that they walk in and the differences in how you minister to them? Or as you talk to a veteran, and some of them may be visibly wounded, but many others may be invisibly wounded. They may have a soul wound. As you talk about trauma, as you prepare your sermons, are you taking those things into account? And when it comes time to officiate their funeral, are you able to understand how to weave military honors at the graveside or in the funeral home into the service in a meaningful way that honors them and glorifies Christ? Perhaps some of you are going to leave this country, and you're going to go serve in one of the 190 nations around this world. Are you aware that in over 60, about 1/3 of the 190 nations around the world, that it's not just an option whether you serve in the military? It's mandatory service. I was stationed in Turkey back in 2016, and whenever the coup happened, and I did not know this before I got there, but I did when I left, that every Turkish male between the ages of 20 and 41 has to do his time in the military. And if he doesn't do his time in the military, then he may not be able to get a job because he doesn't have a certificate that says he served. He may not be able to leave the country. If he leaves the country, he may not be able to get back into the country. He may have to go to jail. And also, if you want to get married, there may not be an opportunity. If a father knows that you have not served your time in the military, he may not want you marrying his daughter because you haven't done your honorable service. And then you're going to be, some of you will be in countries that are enemies of the United States. And I hope you are. I hope you have the privilege to go to countries and to serve others who may be our sworn enemies to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it's mandatory military service in that country. How are you going to relate to the people and the culture that you're ministering in when they know you're an American? That's a lot of theology to think about, and I just encourage you, as always, look to Christ. Develop your theology on the military as you look at the ministry of Jesus Christ, as you work your way through the Scriptures. And the passage I would like to share with you today is Jesus' example in Matthew chapter 8. Matthew writes, "When Jesus entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion, beseeching him, saying, Lord, my servant lieth at home sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. And Jesus said unto him, I will come heal him. And the centurion answered, and he said, Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof, but speak the word only, and my servant will be healed. For I am a man under authority, having soldiers unto me. And I say unto this man, Go, and he goes. And unto another, Come, and he comes. And to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it. And Jesus heard it, he marveled. He said, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. And I say unto you that many shall come from the east and from the west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said unto the centurion, Go your way. As you have believed, so be it done unto thee. And his servant was healed in the selfsame hour. I'd just like to share with you 8 things and then a few thoughts in closing. Number 1, I want you to be aware of the contrast of the centurion to the crowds that were following Jesus Christ. Whenever he approached Jesus Christ, you can be assured that this man stood out in more ways than one. And Jesus acknowledges that. If you look down at verse 10, it tells us that Jesus said to the crowd that was following him. So already this man is set apart, that he is not in with the crowd that is followers of Jesus Christ. But they immediately recognized him as a centurion because of the uniform that he was wearing. It set him apart from the civilian population while unifying him with the soldiers that he was in charge of. A centurion, along with the sword, the shield, the helmet, the other things that the Roman soldier may have, also had a vine stick, a dried grapevine that was used as he would lead his soldiers into battle to recognize him, but then it was also used for discipline on a liberal basis. Matter of fact, one centurion, his nickname was, Give me another one, because he broke so many of them on his soldiers' backs. The man was in charge, by his name, of 100 troops, A Roman legion was made up of 6,000 soldiers. They were divided into cohorts, each cohort containing 6 centuria. The centurion commanded 100 men. There were 60 commands in a legion. That means he was a 1%er for those of you that like to do math. He stood out as a 1%er amongst the 100%. They formed the backbone. They were in charge with that staff of leading their troops into battle. They received greater pay. They received more spoils than did the other soldiers. What was he doing there in Israel? Israel at that time was part of the Roman Empire. He was there to sustain what was called the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. And that might be in the transactions, in the marketplace, the collection at the tax booth, or it may also be in the uprisings. If you read Acts chapter 5, you'll see that there were Jewish uprisings that the Roman soldiers suppressed. What type of men became a centurion? Vestigius, writing in the 4th century, he lists this: the centurion is chosen for his size. So not only did he have the uniform on, but he was most likely a head or shoulder above the rest of his men. He was chosen for his strength, but it wasn't just enough to have strength. He must have the skill and dexterity to handle his weapons well. He was known for his expertise in all the exercises. You can be short. Though this man started out as a plebe, he did not receive any benefits of his bloodlines or from the nobility. He started out as a commoner, that this man worked his way up through the ranks. He had seen death face to face. He was battle-proven. He was aware of his mortality, and he was able to lead his soldiers. He was set apart amongst those others that were set apart. As we see this centurion, though, notice that he stood out from the crowd not just in his chivalry, but in his care he expressed. He stood out because he cared. It was so countercultural to the normal practices of the day. He comes to Christ and he says, Lord, my servant is lying home, sick. He's got the palsy. He's grievously tormented. Lord, he's not getting better. He presents that information to Christ, and Christ looks at him and he says, I'll come heal him. Wow. That was not normal. The rest of the culture did not view slaves and did not view servants in that way. I gave you 2 quotes on your handout, one from Aristotle, one from Cato. Aristotle says that all of these instruments, and notice what he's calling instruments, all these instruments are benefited by the persons who use them, but there is no friendship, no justice towards inanimate things. Well, what are inanimate things? Well, if we're thinking about farmers, you and I might think of inanimate things like a hoe or a shovel or something that you can carry, a basket that you can carry things in. But notice what Aristotle says are inanimate things. You can't have affections towards an inanimate object like a horse, an ox, or even towards a slave. You see the distinction? Master and slave have nothing in common. A slave is a living tool, just as a tool is an inanimate slave. Cato, as he writes in his journals to farmers, he tells them, to the farmers, he said, every year you need to do a little assessment. You need to look out over what you have. You need to look over your livestock. You need to sell your oil if the market price is up, and sell your wine and sell your grain. And then you also, as you're doing your assessment, you need to get rid of the worn out items that may be around. You need to get rid of your worn out oxen. You need to get rid of your blemished cattle, your sheep, your wool hides, your old wagon, an old slave or a sickly slave. Get rid of it. It is superfluous. Slave's just an object. But that's not how it was to this centurion. This centurion stands out for his character, and he stands out for his care, his of his servant. He stands out like an elephant trying to hide behind a flagpole. Everybody knew this man cared, that he was different from everybody else. This leader, as it's your theme, this leader took upon himself the form of a servant to serve the servant. He cares for his slave. He doesn't follow the culture of the day and just cast him aside as Plato and Aristotle write, or Aristotle and Cato write that he should. He says, Lord, I want you to heal him. He took the form of a servant to the slave. Thirdly, we see the contrition of the centurion towards his personal sin and his exaltation of Christ. Do you notice what Jesus said? He hears the servant's request. Lord, my servant's laying at home. He's sickly. Come and heal him. And Jesus just gives the answer like, okay, yeah, I'll be there. What time is it? Oh, it's about 11:40 now. I'll be there at noon. I'll be over at your house at noon, and we'll get this all taken care of. And this sets off a chain reaction in the centurion's life. He's like, no, Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof. But speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. As you go out to minister, your job is to preach the gospel to people. How do you know if you're preaching the gospel? How do you know when people are responding in a biblical manner? I believe that it becomes very clear in this centurion and in his contrition before Jesus Christ that the elements of the gospel are at work. As you think about the gospel, this has served me well, and maybe it will serve you well. It is not original with me, but the gospel is made up of four things: God, man, Christ, and a response. It is an understanding of God's holiness, an understanding of man's sinfulness, an understanding of who Jesus Christ was and his substitution, and a response in faith that leads to salvation. Do you have a knowledge as you're talking to individuals about Jesus Christ? Do they have a knowledge of the high holiness of the Creator God? Do they have an awareness of the soul-sickening depravity that separates them from Him? Do they know the fullness of the salvation that is offered through the sacrificial work of the God-man that came together in His birth, in His death, and in His resurrection and ascension up into heaven? And does that move them in such a way that there is a response, that they will abandon everything else and flee to Him? As you share the gospel with people, you'll have to think about how you present that, because most people were like the others in the crowd. They weren't aware of their sin. And I put a list on your paper that you can read later, but I just share an illustration that one time I was preaching and we had this new family that were attending church, and not only did they care about themselves, they cared about other family members. And so the aunt brought her two little nephews to church one night, and she said, "Pastor, I don't know if they're going to heaven. I want you to share the gospel with them. I want you to find out if they're going to heaven or not." So if you work with kids and you want to have a conversation, especially if they're brothers, you know, one was about 7 years old, one was about 5 years old, the best thing to do is to separate them, right? So I put one over here on this side of the platform and I put the youngest and said, "Hey, I'm going to go talk to your brother for a minute. I'll be right back." And so I set the little bit older one down over on this side of the platform, and I said, "Hey, do do you know anything about God? Well, a little bit. We talked a minute about God. And I said, do you know anything about sin? He said, well, some, yeah. I said, well, whenever we think about sin, we usually think about things like the Ten Commandments. Do you ever want things that don't belong to you? That's coveting. Do you ever see, people maybe at school and they have things and there's that desire in your heart that you just gotta have that? You ever have that? No? I said, well, the Bible says that we're supposed to honor your parents. In other words, like if your mom or your dad say, hey, take out the trash, or hey, clean up your room, do you do things like that? Yeah. I'm thinking, wow, this is a pretty impressive kid, right? I said, do you ever steal anything? We're like moving on through the conversation. I said, do you ever take things that aren't yours? And he's getting ready to say, no, again. And his brother stands up on the other side of the platform and he says, he's lying. I wonder if when the rich young ruler came to Christ, if he would have brought his brother along, if it would have went so well, right? This centurion understood the depravity in his soul, that he was unworthy for Jesus. He didn't even want to come. If you look at Luke's version of this account, he didn't even want to come to see Jesus. He didn't think he was worthy enough. But notice the clarity this man had of Christ's authority. It seemed to be drawn from his military service. He's very clear. I am a man under authority. I would not be here today if Colonel Timko didn't say, yes, Chaplain Faith, you can go down to Appalachian Bible College today. I am a man under authority. I have soldiers under me. I say to one, go. What are you still doing sitting there? Didn't I say go? Go, and he goes. I say to another one, come, and he cometh. I say to my servant, do it, and he does it. You see, as a soldier, you basically have one job. Obey. You'll raise your hand should God lead you into the military, and you'll say, I do solemnly swear or affirm, if you're not comfortable saying swear, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the officers set over me according to the regulations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so help me God. You got one job. Obey. Jesus hears this. Jesus did not compliment people very often, but Jesus complimented the centurion's faith. Matter of fact, you'll find the word marvel, the same Greek word, throughout all the Gospels in reference to Jesus. The whole way from the disciples, when he stilled the storm on the Sea of Galilee, they marveled, said, what manner of man is in our boat? The whole way to the end, when he stands before Pilate, and Pilate's answering him questions, and Jesus remains silent, Pilate marveled. 2 times Jesus marveled. Mark chapter 6, he marveled at the unbelief. But this is the only time he marveled at belief. And it's like he had been looking for it, waiting for it. You'll see that he said, I've been looking all around all of Israel. I haven't found this faith anywhere, not even in Israel. The one place that there should be faith, I have not found it. It's like 2 Chronicles, one of my favorite passages in the Bible. The eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the earth, seeking to someone who is going to take a stand for him, whose heart is perfect towards God. When Jesus saw this in the centurion's faith, he marveled at the centurion, but then he turns back to the crowd that's there with him, most likely largely made up of Jews, and he gives a commentary on the children of the kingdom. He says, many will come. That means the Gentiles, the people that are not Jewish. Many's going to come from the east and the west. They are not the children of the kingdom, and they will believe, and these outcasts will be grafted in. Romans 11:17 tells us, to the fatness of the root. We will receive the blessings of the children of Israel. But he says to the children, to the Israelites, to the Jews, the one who have the genetic connection, the ones that have the family lineage, the ones who should be getting it and believe that. If you look at Jesus' conversations with the religious, he said they're going to be cast out. Now, not all of them. That's why I put Romans 9 through 11. You need to have that understanding. You need to develop your theology on Israel. And God is going to graft them back in, he tells us. And lastly, we see the charity of Christ. He loved this man's faith. He loved this man's servant. He healed him. The centurion knew he abandoned all other hope that he came to Christ. He understood what the hymn writer said, "Fear not that your need shall exceed his provision. Our God ever yearns his resources to share. Lean hard on the arm everlasting availing. Thy Father both thee and thy load will upbear." As we close, I put a little section there. I asked the Bible study that I lead on base. I said, hey, I'm going down to Appalachian Bible College on Monday to speak. I said, what should I tell them? What should I tell the students? And I put a list there. You can take a look at it, but let me just close up with a few thoughts. The centurion could have made his case at sword point. He could have demanded Christ. He could have sent somebody out, one of his soldiers out, and say, I hear there's a healer out there. Go get that man. Bring him to me. My servant's sick. I need this issue fixed. End of story. But that was not this man. He was personally invested in those who were serving him. He was their servant. The centurion devised cultural boundaries. As people look at your faith, will they see that there's something, and it may not be a uniform, but something that stands out about you? As you go forth to serve out there, and believe me, I've battled anxiety. Do you go forth with an awareness of the authority that Jesus Christ has in your life and the world around you? That you are there at his behest to serve as he pleases, and he will take care of you, and he will provide the way, even though the way might lead through difficulty and death. Do you serve with the awareness of Jesus Christ? And as you live daily, does your belief in Jesus Christ, do you make that connection? Does it transcend the situation of the natural into the supernatural? I mean, this is a supernatural statement. Jesus, I know, just like, I read in the Bible once that God created the heavens and the earth. He spoke, and it happened. That Jesus, I don't know how that happened, because that's the supernatural taking authority over the natural, and I don't know how that all works together, but I know just like God's voice went out and created that if your voice goes out, my servant is going to be healed. How many times have you gotten stuck in your personal resources, your personal physical abilities, and you've never come to Christ and asked him for help? Dr. Anderson.